an academic or you're a regular guy. We have to be fearless.
FrontlineTV.com.
Dear brothers and sisters, let us go into the breach.
Hello again, everyone, and welcome back to the Frontline with Joe and Joe. Joe Pasillo, as always, joined by Joe Resinello. And once more, dear brothers and sisters, let us go into the breach on the Crusade Channel, always on air and always online at crusadechannel.com, the last live radio station standing. Remember, go on Crusade Channel, kick the tires, open up the hood. You could go on Crusade Channel, and we know that you could, see all the content, and we are convinced that you're going to absolutely want to become a premium member of the Crusade Channel. And the chat room is always open at crusadechannel.com/chat. Remember, if you like, please follow Joe and I on social media, primarily on YouTube at the Frontline TV. We really ask you to hit the like button, subscribe, share, help us. Joe and I, on social media, we go live once a week. Okay. So it's not like we're some of these other guys out there, and God bless them. They have more time than we do. We have to work our 9 to 5s. What would really help us as far as that goes is if you'd like the video, subscribe to the Frontline TV, share the video, particularly if you share it on Facebook, then the views get seen. You know how it all works. All right. So we're trying to outdo YouTube's algorithm, because damn well they're not gonna promote a couple of jamokes from New Jersey like Joe and Joe. So if you could help us out when you see us on social media, just like, subscribe, share, do all that fun stuff. Now, you know exactly on the Crusade Channel where Joe and I are going tonight. Okay. Like I said, we only go on the Crusade Channel one night a week. So we're going to be talking about abortion. All right. But the funny thing is now, and then maybe it's not so funny, Joe Resinello, you can help me out with that one, is that there's so many different angles to talk about. Okay. It's not just the leak. It's not just the decision. It's everything else that's going on around it. And, as two people that have been talking about this for a long time, as the pro-life movement has been talking about this for 50 or 60 years, okay, it's all coming to a head. T.S. Eliot's one of his famous lines in The Wasteland was, "History is now and England." I would augment that a little bit, and I would say, history is now and America. All right, the tide is turning. Roe versus Wade and all the conversations over the last 50 years are coming to a head right now. A blind man could see it, and if you can't see it, your head is in the sand. And we have to get our heads out of the sand. The fight is here. What we wanted for 50 years is now right on your plate. It's right in front of you. And now the requirement is that we have to act. And I'm sorry if I'm coming across so livid, but the fact is, the more animated we are now, the enemy, and we're going to be talking about the enemy is they're loaded for bear right now. They're coming after you. Over the weekend, they didn't follow through on their threats to go into the churches, at least as far as we could see. There was a few incidents, but nothing actually in the churches. They might actually have had their come to their senses and understand we're not playing games. They go into a church. Okay, because of all that's going on. They're going to be exited from that church. And in some cases, it's not going to be nice. So the thing is, we have to be ready to not say, oh, the Supreme Court, Joe Resinello, they're about to overturn Roe versus Wade. Dude, the fight's coming to you on a whole different level if you don't understand exactly what's happening out there. And that's what we're going to talk about tonight. We're going to talk about the lengths that they go through. But I want to start with this on the Crusade Channel, always on air and always online at crusadechannel.com. Joe Resinello, I'm to the point right now, if I hear anybody call Clarence Thomas and Uncle Tom, I think I might punch him in the face. He is a hero. And I know what you're about to say, Joe. You're about to put me in place. And rightfully so.
But that's what they want.
No, I get it, Joe. But let me finish my point. I want to kick it over to you. I don't mean literally. And I mean that sincerely. Okay. I ain't punching anybody unless they attack me or you or our families and our kids. All right. I'm not punching anybody in the face, but you understand my level of anger when the left calls this guy an Uncle Tom. You know why he's my hero? Because he's unapologetically Roman Catholic.
Oh, no doubt.
That's why he's my hero. And he came out over the weekend. Now, this was an article in the Daily Wire, okay, by Virginia Kruta. And she said Clarence Thomas came out and basically said on the draft leak, The court will not be bullied. And I'm going to just say one thing to you, Joe Rossinello, and I'm going to hand it over to you. And I promise, Joe, I won't get us in too much trouble tonight. I promise. But here is what he said. We can't be an institution that can be bullied into giving you just the outcomes you want. The events from earlier this week are a symptom of that. He says also, we are becoming addicted to wanting particular outcomes, not living with the outcomes we don't like. He also finally, Joe, said on Friday that he and his colleagues on the bench would not be bullied into changing their minds about any given case. Joe, Clarence Thomas has stones. I'm kicking it over to you.
There's no doubt. I mean, what I would first say is juxtapose the behavior. I mean, it hasn't even been overturned yet, to the 50 years of behavior by particularly Catholics. I mean, peaceful protests, no one gets hurt. You could probably count on two hands in 50 years, maybe one, where there was violence to an abortion clinic or a doctor. I can't recall the last time I even heard of such an event. Now you're having threats, physical threats, spray painting churches. That's what I first want to say, the difference. So let's all be like aware of that. Okay, that's number one.
Well, it's important that you said that, Joe, because that blows up their narrative that somehow, some way, you know, like the opposite of what you said. What you said is the truth. The pro-life witness that they swore, Joe, for 50 years, the pro-life movement, they never covered it on the news and anything else. Oh, you know, now they're trying to, they never covered it. They never called it peaceful, unpeaceful. They didn't pay attention to it for 50 years or over 50 years. Now they're trying to say the pro-life movement is violent. Go ahead, Joe.
No, but I mean, it just clearly, even in the last week, I mean, it speaks for itself. It speaks for itself. 50 years. That's the first thing. I mean, also, they're not going to take this lying down. Let's be honest. They're never going to stop. Ever, ever, never, ever. And ultimately, I mean, we've talked about this offline. I've talked about this with my wife. They're just going to do something utterly and absolutely appalling. I actually think they give them enough rope and they'll destroy themselves. They're going to do something. This is my thoughts. Again, I hope I'm wrong, but I think they'll do something appalling beyond, like, you know, understanding, where you're like, I can't believe you just did that. And then it'll get cracked down, like, in a heavy way. Keep this in mind, though. There is no group in America, whether it's BLM, whether it's Antifa, whether it's the mystic rulers of the Raccoon Lodge, whether it's the Masons, whether it's the Knights of Columbus, whatever, picket, doesn't matter, that can threaten the government. The government at any given time can crack down on it all. And
but Joe, that requires, but Joe, real quick, Joe, but
will.
we saw that in 2020.
Political will. They just have to say it.
If you let people burn, if the same people rioting in the streets are akin to the same people that are running the municipal government, that's an issue. That's a problem.
No, I get it. But even with that, if their hand is forced, they'll have to act if they did something bad enough. Like, I'll just use an example. They killed the Supreme Court justice. Dude, it's on.
Joe, I agree with in my heart. You understand something, my brother. I agree with you here at the front line with Joe and Joe on the Crusade channel, always on air and always online at crusadechannel.com. Joe, please, I understand what you're saying. Okay. They shot Steve Scalise and other Republican congressmen on a baseball field. It was a leftist Bernie Sanders supporter. The media and the government got in cahoots, and they never condemned the guy. They never condemned the guy. So what do you think they're going to do to Father Fidelis Mashinsky or Father Imperato or anybody else out there? They're not willing to come down and say, no, violence is not acceptable. They've shown that, Joe. And I agree with what you're saying. You would think that there's a point beyond which they won't go, because you say, okay, you can't hurt somebody, you can't burn anything down, you can't shoot somebody, you can't stab somebody. But Joe, quite frankly, they've already done it. And the Democrats, the Dick Durbins of the world and people like that, the Elizabeth Warrens, Nancy Pelosi's, they didn't condemn anything. Their colleague, Steve Scalise, got shot for being a Republican. And they didn't say anything. Joy
No,
Reid
I get it.
excused
Well,
it.
listen, it's going to be a lot more risky. You go to an abortion clinic, it's going to be more risky. I mean, that's par for the course. And people like Father Imperato and Father Fidelis, but there's a big difference between hurting someone like me, or hurting someone like a priest, or hurting someone like you, and killing a Supreme Court justice, because then it's on. Like, dude, wars have been started, world wars. Like Prince Ferdinand, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah,
You
no, I
can't,
hear you.
there's certain things you can't do. It's like when the World Trade Center came down. Dude, I remember when that happened. I also remember, what's his face in Libya, Gaddafi, who was like our arch enemy. When that happened, he was just like, didn't do it. Didn't do it. Because it's like, dude, you just poked the bear. Like, and America is a massive power. I mean, just look what happened in Seattle when they broke up. That 3 kids died, 2 of which were black, and they were teenagers. That ridiculous whatever the heck was going on in Seattle during the summer of
Chop or
2020.
Chock or whatever it
Took
was.
it took
Yeah.
3 kids to die. Dude, they shut that down in an hour.
But Joe, it took pressure. See,
No,
the thing is,
but it
the
took people
problem
to
is,
die.
if you have a media, Joe Rossinello, let me make this point. I'm going to kick it right back to you, but because again, I don't want to make it sound like I'm all in one way or the other. I just know this is that these people are freaking insane.
They
As we're
are.
having this conversation at the front line with Joe and Joe on the Crusade channel, always on air and always online at crusadechannel.com. Joe, what I'm saying is that it shouldn't have taken that long. See, you're correct in your assessment. You would think beyond which a certain point they're not going to go, and then in this case, Seattle has to come in and they have to crack down on BLM and Antifa and shut that whole thing down. Joe, it shouldn't have lasted the weeks it did to begin with.
Oh, it's a
See,
given.
the problem is when you have a willing media, and again, this speaks to what we spoke about a couple of weeks ago at the front line with Joe and Joe about Elon Musk and why they're blowing their brains out over him taking over Twitter. They can't have real information flowing out there. They don't want this video. There's a video. I was hoping we could pull it up, but I forgot where we got it. There's a girl who's mocking the Catholics in front of Old St. Patrick's Cathedral in downtown. That's where I used to go. Okay, to go and go to mass on Saturday mornings, first Saturdays, and walk down to Planned Parenthood. I've seen the crazies right up front, right in my face. This chick was off the rails, like it was a performance. It was almost like performance art in front of these men, in front of the Old St. Patrick's, with women singing "Thank God for Abortion." Listen, we know they're going to do that, but they don't want that and anything else that they do broadcast out there. They certainly don't want it put out there on Twitter. They know that CNN and MSNBC are not going to talk about that. So again, my point to you, Joe, and please, I'm going to kick it back to you. It shouldn't have never gotten to that point. And my fear is that with the violence that's going to occur because of this, what looks to be an overturning of Roe versus Wade, okay, is that the problem is the unwilling participants or the willing participants in the government are going to allow the violence to take place when they should shut it down until they get to that point. Like you said, they can't put the lid on it anymore. My problem is that in the meantime, in that interim,
Oh, no doubt.
people can get
That's a
hurt.
fact. Oh,
People
there's
could get
no
hurt.
question about that. There's no question about that. It's already showing itself. It's sad. And that's why I began the show basically saying, look at the difference. If you're an objective person listening to my voice right now, look at the difference between how the pro-life folks have conducted themselves and how this group is conducting themselves.
Right.
Look at the difference, because it's stark and it's real. And
Joe,
it's
they can
black
never
and
say
white.
that the pro-life movement is violent. Like you said, they might be. Even Sam Harris, the atheist, leftist, I heard him a while ago on Bill Maher's show. You know, you got a bunch of, pro-abortion people. What they want to talk about some bombing of an abortion clinic that some Catholic did in the 1980s. Even he admitted that doesn't happen. That doesn't happen. There's no abortionists getting dragged out of an abortion clinic by a bunch of Jewish Catholic men and beating the crap out of them in the middle of the street. There's
That
none of
doesn't
that
happen.
occurring. That doesn't happen. And they know it, Joe, by the way. They
Well,
know
like
it.
I said, I mean, their arguments stink. I've listened to a few of them. I sometimes, to be honest with you, just to hear the arguments, I'll turn on MSNBC and I'll listen. Their arguments stink. Um, and frankly, they've lost on every count, particularly constitutionally. That's why it's getting overturned.
Right.
This is Ruth, keep this in mind. Ruth Bader Ginsburg. It doesn't get more liberal. She said it was unconstitutional. Alan Dershowitz has publicly written about how it's unconstitutional. Roe. So let's just get it clear. But here's another thing. There's no talking. You might as well listen. There's no listening. There's no talking. There's no sense or logic you could put, because frankly, a lot of these women are triggered because most likely they've had abortions. And to acknowledge the fact of what they did is earth-shattering. So it's a rationalization and it's a projection of hatred and anger. And there is no logic, or there's nothing anyone can say. Nothing.
Joe,
You might as well not even, to be honest with you, even conduct the conversation, because it could.
I agree with you 1,000%. I got a friend of mine, and I know, from my travels, a number of atheists. Most of the time, atheists, in my experience anyway, I know this is anecdotal, are not leftists. Usually they're more libertarian. Okay. They don't want government or religion. So I get it. I understand the impulse. I don't agree with it, but I understand it. All right. My atheist friends who are libertarian, they're on this issue, they're like, yeah, let it go back to the States. They're pro-abortion. Maybe not up to demand, maybe not up to the day of birth. In other words, they're pro-choice on some level. Okay. I certainly don't agree with that. But nonetheless, they say, yeah, what's the matter? If Texas wants to outlaw abortion, Oklahoma wants to outlaw abortion. They're you know what? Their Bible, in many cases, not all cases, is the Constitution. In other words, to them, the Constitution is a document that should be adhered to. I'm not saying it shouldn't be, but obviously we put Holy Scripture above everything. Okay. So, and in their mind, they say, you know what? I agree with, I don't agree with pro-life people, but I do think that Roe versus Wade should be overturned because it's not a right enumerated in the Constitution. Therefore, it belongs to the people in the states. I don't agree with that. I want to see, like Robbie George and Joe Resinello want to see, a criminalization of abortion. That's different. But on this issue, Joe, Roe versus Wade, there's a lot, as you mentioned, Dershowitz, Jonathan Turley, Lawrence Tribe, Ruth Bader Ginsburg said it was bad law. What? Why? Why are they going so? And another thing too, Joe, and then I'm going to throw it over to you. Why do they give a crap whether or not a woman in Oklahoma could have an abortion? Most of the abortions occur in New York, New Jersey,
condemns
and
their
California
behavior,
anyway.
Joe.
What's that?
It condemns it again. Like, you're right, because here's another thing. Let's be real. Abortion's not going away with Roe. Like, that's another thing. America will still have legalized abortion. That's another, like people should get that through their head. With that said, this is a great leap forward for the pro-life movement. Huge victory, if you ask me. But keep this in mind. I always say this. All evils that have ever been perpetrated on mankind, you can go back biblically to the Egyptians enslaving the Jews, to evils. We can go on and on and on and on. They come to an end. God will never permit this to go forward forever, ever. And if you're fighting against God, you're going to lose. There is something fundamentally true about that. This is another step. And here's another thing. Never discount events or certain, like, for instance, we'll use the George Floyd incident. You couldn't have calculated that. Like, you couldn't have written it. It was a freak thing that, like, started a fire in the country. The same thing can happen on the other side. Like, this is where, the old adage, like, man plans and God laughs. This is a wrong that will get righted eventually. This is just a step. Eventually, there will be no abortions in this country. Maybe that means the country falls apart. Who knows?
Maybe.
Could be. And I got news for you. That's not a good thing. Keep this in mind. The world, I've seen a lot of the world. There are some bad mother effers out there, dude. And they're a lot worse than the Democrats. Like, I'm talking brutal. Brutal, brutal,
Well,
brutal.
I'll be honest with you, Joe. I can't even call them Democrats. I mean, in my lifetime, hey, there was a time in my life I called Joe Biden a Democrat back in the '90s. I knew what he was. He was a liberal Democrat. He was opposed to funding abortion. He was in favor of some restrictions. At one point, early on, he was pro-life.
Oh,
Okay,
Joe
so
Biden just, yeah, dude.
yeah, no, no,
I
I'm
mean,
just
Joe
using him
Biden's
as
a
an example.
mouthpiece to a machine. It's sad. I mean,
Well,
it's so.
it's sad for him because he's going to die a mumbling, stuttering person who's going to go to hell if he doesn't repent. Quite frankly, because he embraces. I mean, he can listen. I'm not Jesus, and I'm not going to be the one that's going to judge Joe Biden. But he's embraced every evil that his party is proposing, every single thing. There is nothing, even if you want to say he has the ability to understand what it is he's actually saying. Okay. Well, he's saying the things that his party wants, and he's embraced it all.
Well, that he.
But I
I
want to get back
actually
to something you said earlier. I think it's important, Joe, for us to go ahead.
no.
We'll get
What I'm
back to it.
saying is like you can't even take what he's saying as it's coming from him. He's just a mouthpiece for a machine. Joe Biden is no longer Joe Biden.
But do you make it? Is he making a choice to be that guy
Of
then,
course he
Joe?
did. He made a choice. He wants to be the president.
Well,
I
then
mean,
he's
like, let's
morally.
be
Then he.
honest. That's exactly what it was. All of them. I mean,
Well, if
like
somebody's
all of
feeding
them.
him lines, Joe Resinello, if somebody's feeding him lines, or it's actually coming out of from his heart or his mind, okay. Either way, he's morally culpable, and we should
Of
pray
course
for
he
him.
is.
I
Joe,
pray
we
for
all
him.
make choices. I mean,
He's a lost
everybody makes
violent.
choices every day.
He's what
D-
T.S. Eliot would have called a lost violent soul. He
Well, it's
embraces the
sad.
violence
I
of
mean, the
abortion and
whole
everything else.
situation is horribly, horribly tragic. And it's, to be honest with you, it's going to come to a head. I think it's going to, like I said, they're going to take it too far and then they're going to be stopped. Keep this in mind. In November, they're going to get crushed. They're going to get crushed. Joe Biden's presidency is over. It's over. They're going to lose the Senate. I read something 10 senators are going to flip. That's what I read. That doesn't mean it's going to happen. They're going to get crushed in the Congress. It's over. The presidency's over.
Well,
Most
I think along those lines, Joe, and tell me if you agree. At the front line with Joe and Joe on the Crusade Channel, always on air and always online at crusadechannel.com. Obviously, we're in May, so you got May, June, July, August, September. You got about October. You got 5 months, 6 months till the election. I think that's why they bought them with this leak. They bought themselves more time because I think they know they're not going to be able to contain the damage. Okay. They know they're going to get their asses handed to them in November. Okay. Um, but that's why they came out with this now to
I
try
know,
to
but
maybe
I'll tell you what,
swing a
not
little
enough
bit.
people care. I'm going to be honest with you.
Well,
You
can
look
we?
at the two extremes, the right and the left. I'm going to tell you, this is the truth. What people care about, and CNN has been saying it, it's the economy.
Joe, I want to kick it over to you. I want you to talk about this because I sent you something on this. John Nolte in Breitbart said basically he asked the question. I'm asking you the same question. Suppose Roe v. Wade was overturned and nobody cared.
Well,
I think it's an
most
important question
people
to be
don't.
asking.
Joe, most people don't. I'm
Either,
telling you
but
this
Joe,
right
either
now.
way. But Joe, my point is that either way. See, if you told a lot of people abortion is illegal, they'll go, so what? If you told them it's legal, they'll be like, so what? See, the fist in the air pro-abortion types, they want to convince you, me, and everybody else out there that abortion is so important to the American people, even liberal Democrats. And most time, Joe, I'm going to kick it back to you. As Nolte's saying, most people don't care. Most people
But
don't
that's
care.
very true. And here's the thing, and CNN polls have been saying it. There's nothing that's trumping the economy right now. Nothing. And if they think that this is going to get people to the polls, they're sadly mistaken.
Well, that's their calculation, Joe.
Well, it's a bad one because it's just what Clinton said. It's the economy. The economy. People, I mean, I'll be honest with you. I see it even in the little things that I've been buying. And I got news for you. I can afford it. Most people can't.
Right.
This was a bad move electing Joe Biden. And here's another thing. What he's selling, Democrats aren't even buying. I saw something on CNN. This is CNN. They said that he is almost at the point of no return. CNN. I saw it in Twitter feed and I listened to it because of the economy. No one is going to, Joe, I'll be honest with you. You have I got news for you. A lot of Catholics don't even care
Well,
about this. It's in extremes. And of course, the news is feeding it, and they're feeding straw man arguments that frankly stink. They
well,
talk about like rape, incest. That's less than 1% of the abortions in America. Less than 1%. Abortion is frankly used as a contraception, a contraceptive rather. People get pregnant, like literally in many cases, like abortion. But here's another deal. No one outside of practicing Catholics who take their faith serious and crazy people on the left, most people don't care. It's not what drives them. What's going to drive people is I can't buy groceries. I can't eat. I'm a Democrat. I can't eat.
but then let me ask you a question. And this is not a comment, Joe Resinello. This is a question for you. Then do most people not care about the culture war in
Joe, I'll
general?
be honest with you. Most people don't. I'm going to tell you what most people I'm taught like because they're not again, a lot of Americans think about things up to their front door. Why people have started to care, I'm going to tell you the if things that people really care about. Again, this is coming from New Jersey. The economy, number 1, their safety. You see, the police thing is the culture war, and it affects people who usually don't care about that stuff. Why? Because they can't get on the bus and go to work. They care about that. Other than that, same sex marriage could care less. The average person in America could care less. That goes Democrat or Republican. These are people living, breathing, paying bills, whatever, could care less.
Right.
That includes many Catholics. They just, whatever. I'm not saying that I'm not like watering down the issue. It's very important. Frankly, those issues bleed into their life, whether they realize it or not, because it's frankly, it hurts family life. Abortion drives women,
Right.
frankly, into bad places. No one talks about women who are post-abortive. There's issues with them. That's factual. You don't
Well,
even
that's a
have to.
well, Joe Resinello, that's a propaganda issue. That's the
No, but I
media
mean, it's just
and together with Planned
factual.
Parenthood. They don't want those
And
stories
again,
of
you
people
can't
that
even
we've
talk to
spoken
these
to.
people, and I'm not even going to. I actually think they're going to destroy themselves. I'm just going to this, but sadly, we're going to have to endure. This is going to be a rough ride until they do. They're going to destroy themselves unquestionably because they're going to do something that is beyond the pale. That if you don't condemn it, you're going to look like a dog. You're going to have to because it's good. They're going to, in my view, they're going to push it to the point where I can't believe you just did that.
Joe, let me ask you a question. Let me ask you a question. Okay, let's go back in history. Okay. You know, when Brutus and Cassius and the other conspirators, when they killed Caesar on the floor of the Senate, they weren't immediately killed by the populace. Okay, there wasn't like you're talking about the killing a supreme, like potentially committing violence against a Supreme Court justice. Okay, my point in bringing up Julius Caesar is that Brutus and Cassius weren't defeated till later on, but Brutus was actually able to go into the marketplace and make his argument why it was okay to kill Caesar. My fear is that history is when you kill the leader, and whether people like it or not, Julius Caesar was a legitimate leader of Rome at that time. Okay, he gave himself powers that were granted to him by the Constitution at that time. You could argue about that. They killed the sitting leader of the Roman Empire. Okay, there was no popular outrage against it. It took a war. In other words, where they were on one side and others were on the other, and then they lost that war, and then they were defeated. My whole point in bringing that up about Rome is, Joe, there's some people that would condone that violence
I get it.
against Supreme Court justices, and they would not be prosecuted right away. In other words, there might be people in the media and in the government saying, no, Amy Coney Barrett should be attacked in her home. That's my fear, and
But
that's
the
why I get
media
so
doesn't
angry, is
represent
because
the
they're allowing
people.
it to happen, Joe Resinello.
The
They're,
media
they're
doesn't
already
represent the
excusing it.
people. They're
What?
trying to get clicks. The media is all about shock, Joe, because they're trying to make money. Our media does not represent, again, I talk to people, Democrats. I live in New Jersey. No one talks about this. Nobody. I pick up my kids. There's all parents out. Never once has anyone brought this up. Never once, ever. The media, the corporations, the politic is completely distanced from the people. That's part of the problem. I don't think people care as much as we might think about this issue. There are people who do. But what I'm saying is the media does not do. They're trying to make money. Everything is about shock. It's a shock. Everything, this, that. They're feeding the machine. Average people who just live, they don't. I'll be honest with you. The media doesn't drive me on the right. I got news for you. Like in terms of my I don't let it.
Right.
On the left or the right. I simply don't. I don't scroll anymore. I allow myself in the morning. I've weaned myself off of it. I don't get absorbed in it. I'm aware of what's going on.
Right.
Obviously, I'm passionate about issues. I vote as a Catholic, but I'll be truthful with you. I don't feed into the frenzy because that's what they want you to do. This is an insane time, to be truthful with you. It's insane.
Joe does it, and Paul's in the chat room. I think Paul's a first-time listener. Paul, we'll stop talking over each other. Thank you, Paul. We love you. But when Joe and I get animated, sometimes we talk over each other, but it doesn't happen too often. At the front line with Joe and Joe on the Crusade Channel, always on air and always online at crusadechannel.com, the last live radio station standing. The chat room, as I mentioned, is open at crusadechannel.com/chat. Joe, I can't, in my heart and intellectually, I agree with you 1,000%. The only difference I think between you and I is that I don't think they know any bounds. And unfortunately, why I brought up about whether or not people care, okay, that was Nolte's point in Breitbart about, is Roe versus Wade, nobody's going to care, is that, but they're also not going to care if these people perpetrate violence in the street. They're not going to care if some wacko goes in front of Old St. Patrick's and about 100 or 200 pro-abortion fanatics are out there chanting in front of a Catholic church, thank God for abortion, or preventing the rightful procession, a permitted by the city with a permit procession from Old St. Patrick's prayerfully down to St. Patrick's, down to Planned Parenthood. My point is that where is our protection then, Joe Resinello, if nobody cares?
Well, Joe, that's why I'm saying it's going to be a rough road. There probably won't be as much, and there's going to be violence. You have to realize this. Civil disobedience doesn't mean you always walk on a smooth road. Civil disobedience might mean you go to jail. Like for instance, I'll just use an example. Dorothy Day was a pacifist. She did not pay taxes. Dorothy Day refused to pay federal taxes because of Vietnam. And there's a price for that. She never went to jail. But the point is, the government could then say, that is your choice. Even if you believe you're correct in doing that, I can arrest you and I'm going to.
Right.
There is a price to pay for civil disobedience. Just because it's the right thing to do doesn't mean you don't get beat up. Many people in life have gotten beat up and beat up badly for standing up for what's right. Talk to blacks in the South. Talk to them. The horror that they endured. Horror in plain English. I mean, you put yourself, look at the first, I can remember watching a documentary with Joe Namath. I think it was at the University of Alabama. And because he grew up in Pennsylvania, watching like the first black students on the University of Alabama. I remember him commenting on that. That was horrible, disgraceful. Don't tell me that just because it's right, and they were right, they had a right to go to school. That doesn't mean that they weren't terrified, that they didn't suffer, and we're going to. But here's the deal. As Catholics, I've said this many times, we have to know the truth, speak the truth, live the truth, and suffer for the truth. Ultimately, though, all suffering comes to an end. Again, Rome was defeated. It took time. People suffered. There are going to be people who suffer as a result of this. The temperature is going to rise. Ultimately, they will be defeated. They're going to hang themselves. Watch. You watch. All people who take things to that degree always do. They never last, ever.
Right.
History proves it, and they will fall. But it's going to be a rough road. And here's the deal. If you're going to go to Old St. Patrick's, you got to know that. You got to know that, and you got to accept that reality. That might mean you get beat up. That might mean, period. End the story. Whether you're a priest, a nun, a layperson, a mother, that's what you're dealing with. Crazy people. And that's just the way it is. And shame on the police if they don't do anything.
Well,
But
they said, I found this out last night or a couple of nights ago, and I was so totally livid. My poor wife had to hear me because I was going off on a diatribe. In other words, the cops basically said we cannot guarantee your protection. I'm like, your police in New York City. You got people on one side and people on the other. It's your job to guarantee their protection. What are you talking about? You're supposed to arrest people if they get in the way. Those who would, let's say, again, you could say what you could say. Well, it happens on both sides. No, you got people coming out of a church, walking down a sidewalk. They have a permit to do so. They're going to walk 2 blocks down. They're going to stay across the street from Planned Parenthood, not on the sidewalk in front of the doors, across the street, and they're going to pray. When they're done praying, they're going to walk back, and that's what they do. So the idea that the cops won't actually, and again, I guess the police didn't protect. I never liked John Lewis too much, but he did get his head cracked open on the bridge, protesting during the civil rights movement. I just believe he became a liberal Democrat hack, but I'm not going to take away from what he went through, and he got his head cracked open, protesting against the injustices, in the South. During the time of the civil rights movement. Where were the cops then? And that's my question now. Where are the cops now? Are they going to allow these people then to crack your head, Joe Resinello, or my head?
Some cities probably will, but ultimately we know what happened there. And here's another thing. We'll talk about that event. Rosa Parks. Who would have called that? A small little woman who started like a storm. You can't calculate certain things. Like, this is what I mean. A great example of this is I love the movie with Ben Kingsley, Gandhi. Gandhi threw the most powerful empire out of India without firing a bullet. Without firing a bullet. Mm-hmm. And when he started to get an upper hand, I love it in the movie. It was so powerful. They call him in to talk. They thought they could buy him off. And he just says, they tried to throw him like a bone. He just looks at them across the table and just says, "You will leave." And he defeated them. John Paul II defeats communism in Poland. Not a bullet was fired. And we will defeat them too. But it may take violence perpetrated against us. It's not the first time it's happened, and it won't be the last. But I will guarantee you we defeat you. Guarantee you, because our will is stronger than yours. I don't care what you think. Our will is stronger than yours because it's fueled and animated by the Holy Spirit. And we will defeat you. It's not even a question in my mind. People should look at it from that perspective. They could rant and rage and scream and cry. You will lose because you're in the wrong. And there's no doubt in my mind, none whatsoever.
Well, they are, Joe Resinello. And if you're just joining us, you're listening to The Frontline with Joe and Joe on the Crusade Channel, always on air and always online at crusadechannel.com. But this is what bothers me, is that obviously we are religious men. We're Catholic men. We're zealous for the faith. Okay. We don't do the things that they do. And this is a religion for them. This is not just some innocuous act. It's a woman's right to choose or anything like. No, this is a religious act. Many, and I know many people who are listening to us would agree that this is a diabolically religious act. Okay. But we do need, I think, Joe Resinello, you would agree, we do need some support. And what I mean by that is, you're right, God is on our side. Ultimately, we're going to win. But while we're fighting this battle, both, support from the hierarchy in the church, and yes, support from the government. And we have said on this show before, we're not looking for messiahs in the government because there aren't any, but there are people that think like us, act like us, want to see the same results as we do, and they have some political power, Joe Rossinello. And with that political power, they have our back. Josh Hawley is one of them, and he's spot on. He says abortion is the left's religion, and they'll do, and that's the key word there, Joe Rossinello, because you just made it clear. They'll do anything to defend it. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, it is a religion to a degree because it's a lifestyle. It's about casual sex. And it's also about people, many of them who are ranting and raving, they've had abortions and they're not about to admit that they took the life of an innocent child. They're not going to say that or believe that. They've rationalized the thought away. You see, that's why the conversations, they're futile. They're futile. That you have to get underneath the conversation to resolve these issues. Have to. There's no, it's like taking like a racquetball and throwing it up against the wall. No one's listening. They're just not, and they're not going to. Because again, people are not willing to change their lifestyle, Joe. Like, let's be honest. Like, if you are involved, say, to be honest, I'll just use an example. You're married and you have girlfriends outside of wedlock. You're not going to have a kid. Say you're an established person. You know, you have a wife, you have kids, you own property. Your kids are all quote unquote, upstanding kids in the community, and you have girlfriends on the side. What if one of them gets pregnant? Guys, just so you know, when you have sex, sometimes a kid results from it.
Right.
Just so you know. So
Right.
we're all on the same page. So you think I'm going to change my behavior? No, I'm not. I'm not. I don't think about God. I'm not driven by the last four things. The calculus does not go through that lens for me, and I'm not going to change. That's why the conversations, it's not even worth having.
Well, Joe, I agree with you. You know who else agrees with you? And I think I'm glad you brought that up, about the exploitation of women by men. I was reading over the weekend, Elle Reynolds in the Federalist, and she had a great article about this. She talks about everything you just brought up. She says, why are so many men desperate to kill babies and traumatize women? Joe, it's for the reason you just said. They want to be able to have their business, their wife, their kids, and they want their girlfriends. And when the gumad number one or gumad number two or gumad number three ends up getting pregnant, again, they're using that woman. I hope those women don't think that they're liberated in any sort of way. That's one of the lies of the left. Any of those mistresses of this hypothetical man we're talking about, they're being used by that man. They're being exploited by that man. I thought we're not supposed to be in favor of that. Okay. But according to the way Elle Reynolds put it, some men are panicking. You imagine this, Joe? They're panicking about losing their power to exploit women. Joe, a lot of men in Texas, they have mistresses. And when those mistresses get pregnant, they want that
Well,
baby dead.
that's everywhere. I mean, women too. I mean,
Well, I'm talking about a pro-life state.
but this is where the mindset has to change. Like it's so ingrained in our society. I mean, we've talked about it. It began with the sexual revolution. The mindset has to change. That's why these stupid debates on like Fox or CNN or MSN, it's a waste of time. It's
they're useless.
drama.
They're useless.
All it is just clicking. It's like watching, like, to be honest with you, like a fight, like a boxing match. It's like driving by a car wreck. And that's what it all is about. You're not getting through because people, again, they have to change their focus. They have to shift, and they're not willing to do that. They're not.
Right.
I mean, but ultimately, this is going to go down. I believe Roe will change. And frankly, it's going to get hairy for a while. How it ends, I don't know. I do think they will destroy themselves. I do. I think it's going to be a rough road. I really do. And people got to get that through their head. It's
Well,
not going to. It's
We have
going
to
to be a rough road.
we have to
Um,
prepare ourselves for, like you said, we have to prepare ourselves as we're mentioning. Their religion, their secular diabolical religion is threatened. Their way of life is threatened. And again, let's shift it from the crazies, and most of whom were women, in front of Planned Parenthood. But I want to stay on men for a second, okay? Because one of the reasons why we do the show at the front line with Joe and Joe is to try to appeal to men to act like men. Joe, I was told by a woman a very long time ago, very long time. This has got to be about 20 years ago, that she might be pregnant. My first response was, "When are we getting married?" Like, I never the idea of abortion, not because I was such a great guy, because I'm not. All right, I wouldn't have been doing that outside of marriage anyway. But that was the life I was leading. But I haven't had enough sense to know if I got a woman pregnant, I was going to be a father, and I was going to
well,
have.
I'll
I
be
mean,
true with
that's
you. I
accepting at
don't
least,
wanna
Joe.
be I mean, I could just speak for me. I don't wanna be married to someone I don't love. That's why you shouldn't be having sex. That's why outside you see, the church has wisdom. No one wants to listen to it. The church knows what it's talking
No,
about.
no, but Joe, I was talking about. I agree with you, but I was talking about the fact that I had
No, I
already
get it. I
acted.
get it. I get it.
You
But
know,
ultimately, too, in fairness, because I know people that have done that, that doesn't always result in a good marriage. Like, I'm not saying you have an abortion, but what I am saying is, like, people have sex with people that they don't love. And again, when you have sex, the possibility is always there.
right?
And as long as you buy into that lifestyle, you need contraception and you need abortion. You
You are
need
right,
them. It's just a fact. And
Joe.
that's
Let
why
me
it's their religion, because I'm not changing for you.
Joe, let's go in a different tack for a second because you brought something up. Okay, I think it's important because Joe, you're talking about bad jurisprudence. Part of what you were talking about was just bad law. In other words, this idea that abortion and anything else is been decided by the Supreme Court. You alluded to it earlier. You also said the act itself, abortion. And I would dare say others like contraception, all of that's just going to finally come to a tipping point. Okay. Joe, not for nothing. We spoke a couple months ago on our show at the front line with Joe and Joe on the Crusade channel about the Supreme Court as an institution poking its nose in the culture war when it should have never been in the culture war. All these things that people were fighting about, whether it's abortion, contraception, prayer in schools, a lot of these things, they belong to the states. They don't belong to the Supreme Court. Here's one thing I'd love your comments on. This might not be just about abortion. This whole what's going on now with this, you can't even call it the Roberts court because Roberts is on the left. I will call this the Thomas court, okay? And this will be the Thomas Alito decision, primarily Alito, okay, in overturning Roe versus Wade. This could signal to the culture warriors out there that the Supreme Court is backing out. And if the Supreme Court starts backing out on many of the things that they stuck their nose in over the last 70 years, that could be two things. And I'm going to hand it over to you. Number one, it's a very hopeful sign that a lot of the power is going to be returned to the states where it belongs on many of these issues. And number two, Joe, I love your comments. That means more of the responsibility is going to be on us. And we have to step up our game. Your thoughts?
Well, we'll see. I mean, the Supreme Court's there when a case gets triggered. That's what happens. I mean, it makes all so it's hard to predict how, if they're going to just jump out, because even other cases that involve the culture war could make their way up to the court just because of the nature of the case. Um, so that's hard to predict. I don't know. Could it happen? Sure. But, I mean, this obviously no one would have predicted that a case out of Mississippi would have made it all the way to the Supreme Court, but it did. And they're going to make a decision. And we'll see. I mean, ultimately, this case, though, and this issue, it's not constitutional. It simply isn't.
But
And
many people, that was why I brought it up, Joe Resinola. Many people would argue that Griswold was a usurpation of states' rights. That there are many decisions that the court has made where they decided for the states exactly what the states were going to do. So let's say Alabama, I'm just using them as an example. If Alabama wanted to ban the sale of contraception, they have the right. Many people would say, well, sure, they They could ban the sale of alcohol if they wanted. They could ban the sale of drugs. They could ban the sale of contraception. The state could do what they want. Contraception is not a right in the Constitution. Certainly, selling contraception or buying it is not a right. It's up to the individual states. I'm using that as an example. Is that
Sure. I
perhaps
mean,
I
could
don't
it
know. Maybe
happen?
they're
Yes.
signaling
I
that they're going to
wouldn't bet
back
on
out.
it though.
What's
I
that?
wouldn't bet. I wouldn't bet on it.
Oh, I'm the Joe. I'm not betting on it. I'm not even going there. See, to me, they could back out of the culture war all they want. The fact is they should be proactive, particularly on abortion, and they should criminalize abortion under the 14th Amendment. I'm not going there yet. But you understand my point.
There's certain things that, like you used the example of a dry county. There's absolutely. I mean, like, listen, people vote. If that's what you want, then that's what you get. I mean, I'll use the town I grew up in. There are no bars in Rutherford. No
Right.
bars. You could buy alcohol. There are no liquor licenses sold in Rutherford.
Right.
That's a choice of the community. I mean, but again, then there's certain things that could, like a case could happen, not about alcohol, that could trigger and make its way up to the Supreme Court. It's hard to say. I mean, like, listen, this issue is a volatile issue because it comes down to pleasure. It comes down to a lifestyle. America needs to get reorientated to something. And frankly, I don't think there's a politician out there that can make it happen. Even like this court case, abortion's still going to be there because the behavior is going to still be there. People still have sex outside of marriage. People live with their girlfriends. People don't get married and live a laissez-faire attitude. And abortion is vital. And so is contraception. Before that changes, I'll be honest with you, it would almost have to be like an act of God. Like people are not going to give that up. You have to have a conversion of heart. I can't legislate that. I can't even tell people I love that they're not listening. People I love, like close to me, because they don't see the danger of it. They have scales in front of their eyes. They don't see what it's doing to them, to their relationships, like to their marriage. They don't see it and they don't want to hear it. So, like, ultimately, though, again, all evil comes to an end because God loves us that much. I always think in the gospel about the fig tree, and it's kind of like us in a sense. What did the disciples say? Rip the fig tree down. It's not bearing any fruit. And Jesus is like, give it a year. God constantly allows us to fix it ourselves. But eventually he says, no, I can't allow you to go on like this anymore. And he steps in. God the Father did that with Jesus. We're a mess. So he brought his son into the world to fix it. Well, ultimately, this will get righted too. And we're making a step. That doesn't mean it's going to be an easy road. And like I said, there's going to be trouble. There is no question about it. Don't in it for a minute, like people who do go to these abortion clinics, who pray, I got news for you. It's getting upped. There's going to be trouble, and you have to know that. But you know something? People have faced, like I said, used the civil rights movement in the South, use what the Indians did in India against the British. I mean, there's a scene in that movie with Gandhi where the men marched and the British just beat them with staffs, and they didn't raise a finger. Row after row after row after row, and they just got clubbed to death. Did you see the movie with Ben Kingsley?
I haven't seen it for quite some time, but I know the incident that you're referring to.
Dude, they defeated them. They defeated the English. And these people will get defeated, but that's what it took. I'm just saying, and here's another thing. They want you to be violent. Because then it's just like January 6th. They're still talking about January 6th like it took place yesterday.
I know.
It's a year and a half.
That's
it's one
the
event,
danger.
and it was wrong.
And that's
let's be honest. Like it was. You could just strategically speaking. What do you think was going to happen by doing that? Do you think you're changing the outcome? It was like a friggin' fraternity party, for crying out loud. A bunch of 20-year-olds. Like, do you think you're going to change the outcome of the presidency by that ridiculous event? No, Absolutely not. That
Well,
was
Joe, in fair, but okay, but in fairness, though, and again, we're not going to talk about that event in particular, but in fairness, there would a lot of people would apply that standard. Joe Rossinello, I love you. I'm disagreeing with you a little bit. A lot of people have tried to suggest the pro-life, the March for Life every year was useless for 55
But
years.
there's a big difference between walking up a street, praying the rosary, and because you're breaking the law. You're breaking the
No, no, I'm
law.
talking about the act of those people that went to hear Trump's speech and wanted to
But Joe, it
peacefully
was
make their
more
voices
than just
known.
that. That was a strategically bad move, like purely strategically. Like it's still being used against you. You
I
don't
know, I
give
know,
the enemy fuel to defeat you. And that's what they want. They
I know.
want you to fight them. They do.
Joe,
Because it's
I
going to be
gotta,
on television. And I'm not talking about defending innocent people or defending yourself or defending your wife. That's not what I'm talking about. What they do want you to do is to be violent.
yes,
They want it. And I
I know.
got news for you. The most powerful people is Father Fidelis. Father Fidelis, dude, don't screw with Father Fidelis. I got news for you. He'll let them kill you. Kill him. And he will become a martyr. Like this is what I'm saying. Like that is so much more powerful than, to be honest with you, like having a riot in front of a church.
I know, Joe.
A-
I know. It's a
And,
balance.
and
I
I,
agree with
so
you.
much more powerful. And this is, and here's the thing: if you really are pro-life, that's what it's going to take.
I know. But Joe, you
That
can't.
is what it's going to take. And I got news for you. That's what I'm talking about. Will. Our will is stronger than yours.
Joe,
It's
I agree.
easy to punch someone in the face.
Joe, I agree, and I can turn the other cheek as I'm supposed to, and if I get punched in the face, but again, they're not
No, I'll
stupid
be honest
people.
with you.
Real
Then
quick,
don't
Joe. Real quick,
go.
Joe.
You're not
Real.
supposed to go then. It's not for
But okay,
you
but
then.
Joe, but here's my question. Okay, then you're not supposed to go down there. But
No,
what about going to mass?
you
What about going to
shouldn't
mass
go
on
then.
Sunday? What
Let
about going?
Father Fidel, that's different. Again, all you have to do is call the police. Obviously, you protect the innocent. I'm not talking about that. We are not here to fight them on their terms. Jesus didn't do that. Jesus did not do that. We're here to defend people if they fight them. That's different. We will defeat them in the way that Christ told us to, and we will defeat them because our will is stronger than yours. Ultimately and absolutely stronger. Anyone could punch someone in the face. That's so easy, particularly someone that's not going to be able to defend themselves. That's easy. I listened to Jordan Peterson. You're a loser if you do that to someone who's weaker than you. A loser. Period. End of story.
Joe, then they're the losers because
They
they're
are, and they're going to lose. You just said it. That's how you beat them. That's how you beat
Well,
them.
Joe, I'm going to be honest with you. We have to go because we're coming up. We're coming up at the end of the show. I got to be honest with you. In my heart and in my soul, I know that what you're saying is correct. I do. My dilemma, and we can't get into it anymore tonight. On the Crusade channel, always on air and always online at crusadechannel.com. But my dilemma is what it always is: the defense of women and children, because I
Joe,
don't put
we're
anything.
on the same
Real
page.
quick, Joe.
Joe,
I
we're
don't
on
put
the
any.
same page, and I'll
I
be
don't put
truthful with
anything
you.
past
That's
these people.
different. Joe,
I'm saying
we're
I
on
don't put anything
you're
past them.
twisting what I'm saying. We are
No.
on the same page. There's a difference between defending a nun, and there's another difference because someone calls you a bad word and you punch them in the face because you don't like it.
Oh no, I agree with you on that.
And that's all it is. And here's another thing: defending a nun just means you beat them off her. It doesn't mean that you then kick the person up the street and back down the street. And
I agree
that's
with you.
not what I'm talking about. Like we have to, our will has to be stronger. And to be honest with you, I'll say it again. Gandhi threw out the English Empire without firing one bullet. Threw them out.
Joe
And we
Rossinello,
will
Mike Church
throw
is
them out too. There's
Mike
no
Church is going to
question
kill
in
us
my
if we
mind.
go. Mike Church is going to kill us if we go over an hour, so we have to go. We have to go. So we want to thank everybody for joining us at the front line with Joe and Joe. Joe Pasillo, Joe Rissanello on the Crusade channel, always on air, always online at crusadechannel.com, the last live radio station standing. Remember to subscribe to the Crusade channel. Go to crusadechannel.com and sign up for free and kick the tires a little bit. Look under the hood. We know that you're going to love the station, and you're going to want to become a premium member. And wherever you see Joe and I on social media, please like, subscribe, share, do all that fun stuff. Help us out if you can. And remember, until the next time, that our conversation is your conversation, and that conversation is going on everywhere. We will talk to you.